Alright guys, we're ready to glue the handles, and for this you're going to need some kind of epoxy or glue. I use the West Systems G-Flex, recommended by a lot of knife makers. Great stuff. These bottles will last you a long time. You don't need a whole lot. If you're in a pinch, you can get the stuff like this, Gorilla Glue. But when you do get the epoxy, you want the long setting stuff. Get the 24-hour stuff. The 5-minute stuff isn't as strong. I know some people have used it with good success. I just like that peace of mind knowing I used the slightly stronger one. So we're going to use the West Systems G-Flex. You're also going to need Q-tips, some good paper towels, and alcohol. Okay. First thing I did, which I did this off camera, I went inside and I washed this knife down with dishwashing soap, and that will degrease everything. And then I hit it again with some alcohol. You want a nice clean surface. After that, I went and I scuffed up the back of these scales with a 120 grit paper. I just laid it on a flat surface and just ran it back and forth a few times, and it'll give it something to bite into, the epoxy. So now what I want to do with those, a little bit of alcohol on the paper towel, and just clean up those scales. I'm wearing gloves for this because I hate getting epoxy all over my fingers. It drives me nuts. But it's an unnecessary step, so you don't have to wear gloves. Okay, you can also take these inside and wash them in the kitchen sink. You also don't want to get any fingerprints on it at this point, so that's another plus for the gloves. The 1/4-inch pins I cut out are about maybe 1.25 inches. You want extra, okay? So there's obviously going to be more than enough. Pin material is very cheap, so don't cheap out on the pins. And Q-tips, you'll see why you're not going to cheap out on those later either. You also need some kind of clamps. I have this style, works fine. They're cheap at Home Depot. Or the C-clamp works fine too. Another cheapie from Harbor Freight. Alright, everything's clean and ready to go, so we're going to mix up some epoxy. Most epoxies I know, including this one, are a 1-to-1 ratio. So I'm just going to dump some out right here. It's just an old shipping envelope. Maybe a puddle about the size of a $50. Now this one's a little more runny than this one, so this puddle's going to look a little smaller, but it'll be the same size. I put it right next to each other so I could see. See, that this one takes a lot longer to settle down. A little bit more. Okay. It's about the same size. Now, I usually use a popsicle stick for this, but I don't know where I put them, so I'm just going to mix it with some Q-tips. Make sure you mix it thoroughly. You don't want your glue joint to fail because you screwed up and you didn't mix it, and there's nothing but the glue without the hardener. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now we're going to liberally apply it to the knife. Except, and this is a tip here guys, and you'll find out the hard way if you don't do this, don't go crazy in front of the first pin. Okay? So from here up, just a little bit up here. Because when you squeeze it, it's going to squeeze out like if you were to squeeze a peanut butter and jelly sandwich as much as you can, the jelly's going to shoot all over the place. Same thing's going to happen with the epoxy. So get in there and kind of try and guess where your squeeze out's going to be. You don't want a ton coming out front, because now you're going to have to sit there and wipe it all off, and that sucks. Oh, here we go. Q-tips, like I said, these are not ideal because you can get some cotton mixed in with the glue and give you a slightly weaker bond, but I haven't had an issue doing this yet. I've done it a few times. Just get in there and get it everywhere, all over the pins, all over the back, even some on the tang here. So I'm spinning the Q-tips because they want to unravel. The nice thing about this G-Flex is it, especially when it's warm, it'll flow pretty nicely. So if you don't get everywhere, chances are when you squish it, it's going to get everywhere. Okay, that looks pretty good. That'll show up on camera. You see how I left this portion dry right here? The squeeze out is going to take care of that, and we'll still have to clean up the front. But a liberal amount in there, and now we're just going to push this knife together. You might have to smack it with a hammer. And for that, I'll take one of these 1, 2, 3 blocks again, put the pin over the hole in the 1, 2, 3 block, like so. Oh, you can't see it. Put the pin over there. I don't want to smack it on this because I might crack my granite plate. Oh, here comes the rain. I'll just do this off camera for a second. Okay, see, I'm forcing it in there. Okay, we got one side on. I'm gonna lay the knife down like that, and now we're gonna douse this side with more epoxy. Really go nuts. You can have all the squeeze out you want on the back, underneath. That's not an issue. You're going to grind that anyway. Just watch that front. I'm even going to fill up that little hole right there with epoxy. You don't want any air pockets either. Now, I'm not sure if I mentioned it or not, but with the 1/4-inch pins, you see I tapered just the one end, the very end. That's going to get cut off anyway, but it helps it go in a little smoother, at least get started a little smoother. All right. If you get epoxy on the outside of the handle, that's no big deal. We're going to sand that anyway. Now I'm going to take my other scale, put a little glue on it. Epoxy, or whatever. I know somebody out there is getting irritated that I keep calling it glue instead of epoxy. Okay, we're going to clean this up right here. Same thing, I'm going to bring it over to my 1, 2, 3 block. Lay it down like that. And just give it a few smacks. Always make sure you're supported when you're beating on your knife with a hammer. You don't want to crack the handle material now after you put all that work into it. So I'm not really beating on the handle material, I'm beating on the pins. And then once the handle material is nice and flat, I'll even out the pins between them. Okay, you've got this sloppy mess here. We're going to clean out some of that with alcohol. We'll get the majority of it off with paper towels and alcohol, and then we'll go back and clean up that front once it's clamped. This way you don't glue your clamps to the scale, which I am guilty of. I have done that before. It happens. See why I wear gloves. Alright, alcohol, take this right off. A little bit of elbow grease, a lot of alcohol. It'll clean it up nice. Hey, big difference now. Now I'm going to put this down carefully without gluing myself to anything. Or getting glue on the blade, definitely don't want that now. Get these nasty gloves off. And I'm going to clamp this blade up. You don't want to use gorilla force on the clamps, or you're going to get I guess they call it a dry joint or something like that. What that means is you're just going to squeeze the glue right out of it. So, spring clamps, or maybe just a little more pressure than that, it should be plenty. What I like to do is kind of give it a little bit of a kickstand. So I'll put one of these spring clamps up here. This way I can stand the knife up. If I put one back here, I'll put it like that. This way the blade is standing up. Because if I do get some glue running while this is setting, which is going to happen, one of the drawbacks of using a high flow kind of glue or epoxy, you could come out tomorrow after you let it set overnight and the blade is covered in hardened glue. That sucks. You don't want that. So I'll kind of kick it back a little bit like this so it flows backwards. And now, yeah, we're starting to get the squeeze out of the front, but it's not so much where it's going to be a huge issue. Throw another one back here by the pins. You especially want to make sure it's nice and solid by the pins. You know what, I'll put it on the other side for balance. Not that it really matters. Okay. You just barely finger tight. 2 fingers, that's it. Okay, here's where the Q-tips come in. We'll get rid of this. Don't need any more glue, that's done. With the glue, sometimes I like to, actually no. Sometimes I like to hold on to this messy thing, just so I know it hardened. You know, and then once it's hardened, I verified that it's hardened, I throw it out. Okay, Q-tip time. Get all the glue off your hands and off all your tools, because I'm sure everything's covered right now, like mine is. A little alcohol. What you're going to do is you're going to inspect the blade itself. I'll pick it up and show you. Alright, you see in the front where that glue is coming out? It's not a whole lot, but it's there. Same thing. And maybe you slipped and you touched the blade somewhere. You got a little glue on it here or something like that. Now's the time to go over the whole thing and clean it with alcohol. And do not be cheap with the Q-tips. You get one swipe, throw the Q-tip out. If it takes you 200 Q-tips, that's what it takes. You'll thank me later. Okay, so one swipe, flip it over. One swipe. That's it. That's all you get. Throw that Q-tip out. If you do more than that, especially in the beginning when there's a lot of excess glue, you're just going to smear it around and it'll look like it's gone because it's wet from the alcohol, and then you'll have a mess to clean up tomorrow when it's dry. It's no fun cleaning this up when it's dry. When in doubt, wipe extra. You know, in little spots where there's just it might be glue or you don't know what it is, that you can just kind of rub around. But otherwise, one swipe, one swipe. You throw a dry one in there now. And check the Q-tip, see if you got anything on there. And if you think it's dry, if you think there's no glue on it, check again. And if you're using this slow setting epoxy, I would come back in a couple hours and look at it again. So tonight, yeah, it's starting to get dark out, it's getting a little late, and I'm going to close up the shop after this. I'm going to bring this in the house, and right before I go to bed, I'm going to check it to make sure that it's that I got it perfectly cleaned. As you can see this right here? It's like an old Buick leaking on the driveway. It's because I tilted it back and the excess is going to want to run off the back. That's what you want. And because this is my nice surface plate, I'm going to take this off, and when I bring it in the house, I'm going to put it on a paper plate. Something that is not going to soak through like a paper towel. Soak through and glue itself to the counter. That would suck. Okay. So that's pretty much it, guys. I'm going to go through and wipe this some more and make sure it's clean, and you guys do the same. Just really double, triple, quadruple check it. These finish bevels up front, not the bevels, I'm sorry, the front of the handle right here where we did all that contouring, clean that up too, because that's going to be hard to sand later. Not impossible, but it'll be difficult. You don't want to take a chance running off the belt and hitting your nice beautiful grind that you spent all that time doing. Alright, that's it for this installment, guys. We'll come back tomorrow once this is set and we'll shape this handle. Have a good night, guys.